Hello and welcome to the 6th Annual American Express Leadership Academy Global Alumni Summit. I'm Richard Brown, the Vice President of Philanthropy at American Express. Thank you for joining us for our first virtual summit and for the first of 3 special live stream events. To our Academy alumni from all over the world, thank you for making this network of like-minded peers so powerful. And thank you for your commitment to leading positive change each and every day. I also want to recognize and thank all of our Academy partners, many who are tuned in right now. This is true. The American Express Leadership Academy would simply not exist without you important partners. Additionally, I want to take time to thank the Alumni Task Force Summit Subcommittee, as well as our colleagues at Atlas Corp, particularly Abby Robinson, Atlas Corp's acting CEO, and American Express's Atlas Corp fellow Isabella Varana C. Lalahi, who have organized the summit. And of course, I have to thank our very own Rebecca Nesson, who's done a tremendous job. We are truly grateful for your ongoing commitment to this effort, and thank you for your dedication and care of our Academy alums. During today's conversation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, so get them ready. If you are joining us via the Summit platform, please type your questions in the Q&A section in the chat box. If you are joining on social media, type your question in the comments section on Facebook or use our hashtag AmexLeads. We look forward to hearing from you. This year's Summit theme is Our Path Forward, Lead, Listen, Flourish. Today's conversation will focus on lead. We are once again thrilled to partner for the 3rd year with the Chronicle of Philanthropy on this conversation. And it is now my pleasure to welcome Trabian Shorters and Tracy Palmer to the virtual stage. Travian Shorter is a New York Times best-selling author and social entrepreneur. He is the founder and CEO of BMe, which trains leading organizations in matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and runs fellowship for Black leaders. Moderating the conversation today is Stacy Palmer, who is the editor of the Chronicle of Philanthropy. Stacy has served as the top editor since the Chronicle was founded back some time ago, and she's also the lead person on the philanthropy.com website. Thank you both for being here. Take it away.
Great. Thank you. What a delight to join you. And let me just remind the audience that we really want this to be a conversation with all of you. So please do share your questions either in the chat box or on social media, and we'll get to you as soon as we can and as fully as we can. Trabian, it is just a joy to see you after this crazy, crazy year. I know you have many leadership lessons for all of us. You did before this year, but I bet this year has really transformed him. And it's just a joy to be able to have a chance to talk with you. You have had a fascinating career. We started covering you when you were a technology entrepreneur, an expert working with nonprofits, and now you're doing very different things. I was wondering if you could, for the audience, talk about your career. How did you get from doing that kind of work to what you're doing now?
Sure. Well, as you said, I am a tech entrepreneur, retired from technology back in 2002, grew up building and hacking and cracking and coding. Went legit when I started a company that AOL and Microsoft and Fannie Mae invested in right on the front end. The company did well, and that allowed me to get involved in more philanthropic pursuits. And so I've been doing that for the last 20 years now. The sort of through line for all of it, though, is a really good technologist, a really good software engineer, a really good hardware engineer, a good hacker, actually a really good hacker, understands that in order to hack something really well, you have to understand that system well enough to get it to do something that it wasn't designed to do, right? And so hacking is social innovation. Hacking is advanced problem solving skills. Like hacking is what I've applied to the rest of my career. And the work that we're doing right now is a cultural hack. It's understanding, personal psychology, human psychology, cultural psychology, movements, and decision making well enough to change how these systems work.
So lesson number 1 is become a hacker. That is our leadership lesson for today.
I would encourage it.
We'll move to the other thing. Tell me about your move into philanthropy. You were at the Knight Foundation, and then you founded your own organization. Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned that after being a technologist, I actually went to work at Ashoka in the U.S., helped them set up the U.S. program, became North American regional integrator, and had a great time with that social innovation shop. Then went to work at the Knight Foundation as vice president of their communities. And Knight funds in 24 cities across the country. They're an innovation leader in the areas of news technology, but also in the areas of community engagement. And I led the community engagement side of the foundation. Out of that work, we began working on African-American male engagement in particular. That's what BMe originally stood for, Black male engagement. And we got a lot, applying my hacking hat, we got a lot of insights on what was so wrong with the way we were even thinking about the problem and how to have next order level impacts. And that's what we actually end up teaching now in our asset framing course.
I want to talk about that. You just used the term asset framing, and we have all been thinking much more, especially in this past year, about really what works in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion training and knowledge. And I think a lot of our discussions have been about what doesn't work, because we've certainly seen that we have not made enough progress. One of the things I love about your approach is that it really is focused on science. Another lesson of this year is that science truly matters. And so I was wondering if you can talk about what asset framing is
Sure.
and how you developed it, because that's part of why it's so powerful.
Sure. So the short version of it is we looked at cognitive psychology and the science of that. We also looked at social psychology and the science of that. And what it showed us is the way that human beings actually make their decisions is not the way that we think that they do. And so if you understand that humans, individuals as well as cultures, are narrative driven. So if you understand that they're narrative driven, then the narrative matters from, the very DNA of something. So the thing that's been sabotaging all of us is we all want a better society. We all believe in equity, right? But the ways that we've been given to even engage is to define people by their deficiencies, define them by their lack, their challenge, the thing that gives them the least agency, the thing that is most scary about their potential. We define them by that, and then we try to engage them as though they are assets or beneficial. But defining people that way makes your brain code them as threat. And so since you're coding them as threat, all your impulses are to respond to them as threat. And so you really try to figure, we say that we're trying to build equity, but what we're really trying to do is manage risk. And risk management strategies are not the same thing as equity strategies, right? And so we're applying this equity language, but everything we do betrays our true intention. Right now, we pursue all of our goals by stigmatizing the people at the center of our arguments. And it turns out that stigma causes you to treat people as threats. So if there's nothing that you all take from this session, I want you to understand that because the baby boom generation, which is the largest generation in the history of the world, right? Because they're in their 70s now, right? Because they're aging out of leadership, right? The merging generation has an opportunity to reset narratives on a scale that hasn't existed for 60 years, right? We're at a time where pretty much anything can change. And what I would encourage you all to think about and really wrap your head around and be intentional about is how do we achieve equity without stigma, right? How do we get equity without stigma? Because currently, the way we approach it stigmatizes people and honestly sabotages all of our aspirations towards an equitable society.
Yeah, the very idea that people who are trying to help and think they're making a difference are actually making it worse, I think is an important point that you have repeatedly made. The do-gooders aren't doing much good all the time either. We all think about the different parts of our society, but...
I apologize, Stacy. I do want to be careful to not beat up on. I don't want to stigmatize the do-gooders. I don't mean that they're not making a difference. What I mean is, literally, we just inherited a way of tackling this thing that's kind of 18th century, and we're in the 21st century. So we just need to upgrade. It's all we're using old software. Yeah.
That's why we need your hacking skills for that upgrade. On a practical sense, if people are leading in their day-to-day jobs, how can they use the approach you're talking about to change narratives? What would you suggest that people incorporate into their leadership?
Yeah. So the funny thing is, asset framing is actually good for you as a person, not even just because honestly, if you paint all the corners of your mind, right? If you're painting all the corners of your consciousness with despair and brokenness and pain, and if you box your mental frame that way, you will get sick. You will feel emotionally tired. You will be drained. You will be So the great thing about asset framing is just acquiring the habit of being able to identify. Oh, I did give you the definition. So asset framing is specifically defining people by their aspiration or contribution before getting into any of their challenges, right? So don't ignore any of the challenges, definitely address the challenges. But framing is all about which information leads the conversation, right? So how you introduce something frames that something, right? That frames the conversation, it frames your interactions, it frames the whole discussion. And on a psychological level, it has much deeper effects than we've been crediting. So on a day-to-day level, I encourage you to figure out how to asset frame people and places that you encounter anyway, right? Someone that you have to work with that maybe you don't get along with as well as you'd like to. They probably have some positive aspiration guiding them. They probably have some positive contribution they make. If you can remember that when you enter your engagement, it's less stress on you to deal with them. So that's just on a personal level. Then in terms of the organization and the work, depending on what your field or your attention is, one of the great things about defining people by their aspiration or contribution before noting their challenges, we never leave out the challenge, right? We're not trying to ignore challenges. But one of the great things about defining people by their aspirations and contributions before you engage them, whether it's your customers, whether it's a region that you're working in, whether it's social impact work that you're doing, is you actually see more options when you do that, right? When all you think, so one of our partners is the Solutions Journalism Network, started by David Borenstein. He's a New York Times columnist. But the Solutions Journalism Network teaches newsrooms and reporters and editors how to write rigorous reporting that is solution-driven. And they've decided to adopt asset framing as a fundamental skill that they teach to all their newsrooms, specifically because when you do that, you get higher order solutions. You get solutions that are higher impact than when you're just thinking about how do I fix a problem. And maybe the last thing I'll say on this is working on how to fulfill aspirations. Like that's what asset framing is. How do we fulfill aspirations is smarter than working on how to solve problems. Because in order to fulfill an aspiration, you have to solve all the problems that get in the way. But if all you do is solve a problem, you solve one, and that's what happens, right? You haven't gotten there. You're not even on the full path, right? So these are ways that you can apply it practically, and I can obviously give you examples of clients that are using this to make a real difference in their work.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because I know you've been incredibly busy training lots and lots of organizations. Can you talk about how various of the places that you've worked with, how are they actually implementing this?
Yeah, so our client list is very diverse, right? We have a ton of foundations, Gates and Packard and the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, but we also have corporations like Deloitte and the National Basketball Association. Is being set up. The National Basketball Association Foundation is being set up with asset framing in mind. So in the case of like Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, this is a foundation that was set up to end poverty in Arkansas here in the United States. And after going through some asset framing training and doing some strategic planning work and letting us play a small role in that, they actually changed their mission to be more aspiration focused. And now they talk about, rather than ending poverty, they're focused on making an Arkansas where everyone can prosper, right? So think about your brands and think about how often your whatever your orientation is might be problem oriented. The best brands don't talk about just solving a problem. The best brands talk about how do you live your best life? How do you achieve your highest aspirational goal? How do you make the strongest contribution to the world that you're in? Well, again, aspiration and contribution is what asset framing is all about. So in the case of Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, switching to making an Arkansas where everyone can prosper meant that they, of course, solve poverty along the way. You can't prosper with poverty still in place, right? So that's how they apply it. And maybe one other, sort of quick example. There's a in the social impact space, particularly in the United States, we tend to bank with the same large corporations that are underfunding, underinvesting in our communities. So we found that when you invest in minority-owned financial institutions, then you get a double bang for your buck oftentimes, specifically because they tend to lend, minority-owned shops tend to lend at 20 times the rate in low to moderate income communities as the commercial banks or as the other banks, but they're all banks. Like they all have the same regs. The only difference is who owns them and whether or not they feel a strong social mission. But you wouldn't even think of or identify these additional resources and allies unless you were asset framing the population. So these are just examples of like how you literally see more options, you engage more people, and you get to talk about your beneficiaries in a language that isn't insulting to their face. You can actually speak to people using the same language in your program applications as you use to their face.
Can you talk about that? What are some examples of how people do that?
Sure. So one of our clients is a grant maker here again in the U.S. And foundations, if any of you have ever worked in philanthropic side, social impact side, foundations literally give you the language. Like they tell you which bad names to call everybody, right? Call them bottom of the pyramid, call them low income, call them distressed community, call them refugees, right? Like they give you the language and they say, if you use this denigrating language, we will give you money, right? So here's the pay to play, right? And so you use that pay to play, of course, because that's how you raise money for your shop. But think about just from a cultural standpoint, even when you win a victory for that population, you are literally doing so by writing them into the public consciousness as a problem. So you win, but you stigmatize their entire line. You've made them more vulnerable to harassment. You made them more vulnerable to loss of opportunity, to discrimination, because again, things that are stigmatized are innately threatening, right? Oh, and I think I lost track of your question. I want to respond. What's your question?
I was talking about how you talk about beneficiaries, and one of the things I know in an article you and I worked on together, you mentioned the example of Donors Choose, and how when they started using the language that you that you embrace, they actually, while we were talking about the fact that foundations sort of require you maybe to use stigmatizing language, they found when they were raising money, it actually worked better when they focused on aspirations, right? So, it truly works. It's not just that you're saying
that's right.
It ends up making a difference.
Oh, thanks for that. Thanks for that lead in, because I'm on the board of Donors Choose. It's a fantastic organization. Fast Company, I forget how long ago, actually rated them as the 9th most innovative company in the world because they pioneered crowdfunding for social impact projects. By the way, Apple rated 14th, but they were 9th. But yeah, this fantastic shop. What they found is when people actually understand how to asset frame the students and the beneficiaries of their work, you actually raise more money. And a simple way to understand that is, if you tell a story about a woman or a child or a community where the folks are bereft and downtrodden and struggling, people care about that and they will donate. But if you define that same population by their aspiration, right? Poor people aspire, right? If they aspire for their children to go to school, if they aspire for a better future, if they're making contributions to the well-being of the community, whatever it is, right? If you define them that way, then you talk about the fact how they are systematically obstructed from being able to achieve their dream. Then people will also donate to that. Like they'll invest, they'll invest in someone who's working hard against impossible odds, right? We care about the underdog. But the way that we tell the story now, we treat people who have been impoverished, right? Like these aren't things that just happened unfortunately. These are things that were done to people, right? We talk about people who've been impoverished, who've been disadvantaged, right? We talk about them as though they somehow created the condition themselves, when that's not the reality, right? You got hardworking mothers and fathers who get up every day trying to figure out how to make a better life for themselves or their children or their community, and they have been systematically disadvantaged. So if you can tell the story, the true story, about how hard they work, how much they care, right, and how willing they are to make a difference, then people invest in that. Like, big surprise, right?
Yes, and probably far more. And I think one of the challenges all nonprofits have is this issue of people get sick and tired of feeling like, well, we're not making a dent in social problems. So, you're really just exacerbating the issues. And I suspect leaving a lot of generosity on the table because people are frustrated. So,
oh yeah.
it's an important strategy in so many ways. I'm curious, one of the things I'd love to hear about is in this past year, just as a nonprofit leader yourself, what are some of the key things that you've learned and that you're thinking about as we move into a period where we hope we're much more in a recovery and a reset moment? What are the things that you are working on and that you feel like you've really learned to propel you forward?
Yeah, I think this concept of equity without stigma is pivotal. It's huge. We say we all want equity. I don't know if people really understand, like in a lot of the business sector, we talk about DEI, but when you follow the history, that's not actually the right progression. What happened was first diversity, because in the United States anyway. In the US, it was diversity, because before that, we told the story of how white men have done everything important. And then at some point, people figured out that there was more than white men in the formation of the country. Other people may have contributed in some way. And so seeing the other people, right? Seeing women, seeing other, that was diversity. Diversity is about seeing. And when you think about the groups that talk about diversity, they usually use that language. It's about recognizing difference. Diversity is about seeing. Well, after you had a round of diversity for 25 years of that sort of being the talk, inclusion became more the next level, because it's not enough to see people. They have to be heard and have to have influence on what's happening, right? So inclusion became the next sort of wave. And after about 25 years of inclusion, we are now at the front end of the equity wave, believe it or not. Because after diversity, you get inclusion. And when people are included, now they want actual power. They don't want to just be at the table. They want to be able to call some shots, right? They want to own some things, right? And that level, right? I always tell people, whether you are in business or in social impact, the word equity, right, always connotes value. It's always about what you value. It's always about who is valued, what is valued, and what level of value it's valued. So now that we're getting into the equity side of it, that's more about ownership and power. And the point I'm just trying to make to you is diversity, equity, inclusion. That wasn't the process. The process was diversity, inclusion, equity. It just doesn't make a good acronym. So
but we need to change it anyway.
but the point is, we're at that moment. And so equity, if we're going to have it, stigma doesn't allow you to value people the way that equity requires. And so our only sort of logical hack path forward, like when you're just looking at the systems work, you're trying to hack a solution, then we must pursue equity without stigmatizing people. Once people who are different from us can be recognized for their legitimate aspirations, for their genuine contributions, when we get that habit, right, when we can look at each other, then we won't be playing whack-a-mole for every situation, right? We'll be able to genuinely value all members of the human family. Can you imagine that? To genuinely value, like equity. Can we have equity for all members of the human family? Well, the only way we get there is if we start to really think about how to pursue equity without stigmatizing people, right? So that's been a huge lesson learned over the last few years. I think we're in a rare opportunity to try to move that. So I'm going to repeat the phrase: equity without stigma. In fact, you all need to hashtag it and make it a thing, right? Make people wonder what it is you're talking about. Because if we can do this, we can flip this thing. I'm a hacker. I think we can hack this whole system upside down in a relatively short time.
How could people do that when maybe if most of the folks who are joining us absolutely have leadership skills, but they may not be at the top of the organization? How do you push that up, especially when, I admit I'm a baby boomer? How do you push that up to your bosses and the people who might not quite see what you're
saying? The good thing about it is the split is not really generational, right? Baby boomers inherited a certain way of thinking, and that's fine. But when you look at what's happening even in the business space or even marketing, for instance, right? The ways that you engage now have just shifted. And so older leaders, boomers, Gen Xers like me, we still want to be effective, right? We're not anti-effectiveness. And what is increasingly more effective is aspirational communication. It actually works better. Empowerment marketing, aspirational marketing actually works better. People, with millennials in particular, and Gen X and Gen Z, with Gen Z in particular and millennials, if you're trying to sell to them, you don't sell to them by negging, which worked on my generation. It was all about, you're inadequate. You don't sell to the next generation by negging them. You have to sell to them by talking about how valuable their aspirations are, how worthy their dreams are, and you literally feed into it, and so your product is part of their vision for, whatever is positive and good. And I guess all I'm saying is, it might feel like the higher ups in your shop, quote unquote, don't get it. And what's really going on is they just have a different frame and a different set of habits. And the fact that you might be able to move and illustrate how to be more effective, how to engage people easier, how to have longer, stronger commitment from your customers, how to retain, how to retain them, how to grow. Like, the fact that you can use these skills to actually achieve business outcomes should be attractive to your bosses. You're probably going to have to skunk work it, meaning like do it first in some small degree and then explain why it worked. But the point is, I don't assume that just because folks have been on the planet longer that they can't listen. The theme here is lead and listen. Like, we're gonna lead and listen. So you might have to lead, but they'll listen.
Indeed, that's a great suggestion. And people have been throwing in questions fast and furiously. So I'm going to move to that and read you some questions from our audience. And we all wish that we could see you in person, but we will try to be able to capture exactly what you've all said. So I'm going to put my reading glasses on so that I can actually see the questions. Angela from Washington, D.C. has a question. Focus on the positive. Trabian, it sounds like you are flipping our normal thinking. In this moment, when our normal world has been flipped, how can we use this upside down time to activate this focus on assets and aspirations?
Yeah. So the funny thing, I told you I studied, psychology and social psychology. So the funny thing about crisis narratives and all that is your body is hardwired to respond to them. So you can't ignore that. It's very effective for getting attention. The problem is all of your crisis responses physiologically are designed to be temporary. Like, all of them. Like, you're not supposed to constantly be in a state of panic. That's not, we're physically not wired for it. We're culturally not wired for it. So what's going on is we've developed only the fear triggers as our motivation, and we're burning ourselves out, right? And we're making ourselves numb. We're making the world numb, and we're decreasing our sense of hope. That's what I was saying about painting all corners of your world with negatives. And we are literally not seeing the strengths that all these different populations bring. We're literally not seeing the love and the common values that we share across our birth characteristics, right? And so I actually think people are all ready for this, right? We're all tired of being constantly fear stimulated. Like, it is literally exhausting, like physiologically, emotionally, spiritually. And so I think we're ready for something new. And I really do believe that whatever group of leaders, whether it's you, your peers, or others that whatever group of leaders can really galvanize this, can really embody the idea that we can lead from aspirations. And again, never ignore the real problems. Like, it's never about just whitewashing thing. Never about that, because we can see through that. It's just about legitimately, not ignoring people's aspirations. Stop ignoring their contributions, right? I sometimes say you don't have to ignore the problem, but we do have to stop ignoring people's worth, right, and worthiness. And I really, whoever said it, I agree with you. Like, if we drill down like that, we can flip the script in a relatively short amount of time. I mean, you'd be surprised, I think.
That's the especially encouraging part, that we can make a difference and move quickly if we do these things.
Yeah.
And you're right. After this year, when I think everybody's been in a state of constant panic, we are truly ready for all of this. So your message comes at exactly the right moment. We have another question. Mabao from Zambia asks, would you define asset framing as engaging people's passion?
I think it's along those lines. The big difference that I would make between passion and aspiration is in a lot of cultures, particularly the English usage of the word passion. Passion is more about your heat and your energy, which is fine. But aspiration is to passion as joy is to happiness. Right, like your aspiration is more seated in who you are, and in fact, just to be really transparent, the reason why I like the word aspiration is because its root word is spirit, aspiration, right? And so the same word, let's see, so that spire root, aspire, conspire, inspire, respire, right? Respire is to breathe. Conspire is to breathe with. Inspire is to breathe in. Aspire is to make your breath, manifest, right? And so I think they're on the same path. I'm not disputing that. I just wouldn't make them synonymous, right? Aspiration resides in people, and passions spike. They go up and down.
That's really helpful in terms of clarifying. And there's another question that's maybe a bit along those lines from Katrina in New York. Trabian, how do you introduce discussions around challenges in the ASP framework? I really like it as it is empowering, but how do you avoid deflating someone after building them up? Can you give an example?
Well, my friend and colleague here on the chat helped me with a brilliant headline to describe this work called "You Can't Lift People Up by Putting Them Down." If you get a chance to read that article in the Chronicle, Stacy was the one who wrote that headline, right? But you can't lift people up by putting them down, right? And so I don't worry about deflating people with asset framing language. In fact, it doesn't happen. What is more likely to happen is those of us who've only been taught to paint pictures of the crisis, we take the first step with asset framing, and then we don't know how to take the next step. So for instance, we might say, instead of defining a kid as at risk, right? We talk about at-risk youth all the time in the United States. That's what we do. An accurate word for most at-risk youth in most circumstances is still the word student. And so we might talk about students who are living in communities that have been disinvested in or that are being over-policed, right? So instead of sticking some label on them that just lets people dismiss them, define them by their aspiration and then describe what makes them at risk. Because when you describe what makes them at risk, then people actually think about, well, wait a minute, it's not about just helping the kid get to school. Why is their community disinvested in? Why are they over-policed? Why are they living in these systemic problems? That's what I meant earlier when I said the solutions journalism folks realize that when you asset frame, you stop using these easy tropes that let people stop thinking. You start describing what actually is creating the problem, which makes people want to fix the real problem, not just help some kid survive an abusive condition.
We have another question. Trabian, what work have you done with agencies like USAID, UKAID, and other foundations? How can they be inspired to flip the script?
Yeah, I would love to work with those shops. I haven't, honestly, most of our work has been in the United States, and then we've done work in Ethiopia and, Germany and India, but, on a spot basis. So we haven't worked with the big shops. So if you know somebody there, please send me their name because I would love to. But that's sort of the short answer. And then the slightly longer answer is for the shops that we do work with, like we've trained probably a dozen of the top 50 foundations in the United States. And so they're starting to start that turn. These are, it takes a while for these ships to turn. But the people inside the foundations, they get it, right? The executive teams, the leaders, they get it. And they realize how many things they have to change, all these structures they have to change to get there, but they're willing to make the change. They're working on the change. And so I feel like it's coming.
Good. And perhaps we will lead to a connection here from this conversation. So that would be awesome. Katrina from Canada has a question. Amazing. I and my team feel exhausted at this moment. Trabian, where do you find the energy to keep pushing these positive ideals forward, even when you hit a wall, negative thinking and disagreement?
Well, I live in a special world, right? My organization is BMe Community. It is a network of inspired Black men and women who every day get up and try to make the world a better place. They work at the grassroots level, they work at the corporate level, they work in foundations, they work in government. And their common denominator is they love people. And so our whole community, I know it's funny, it's not a business term, but our whole community is love oriented. Like we believe, that's why asset framing makes sense for us. Like we believe in speaking life to people's higher aspirations. So for me, it's easy. I live in the Wakanda bubble. So I'm always on that sort of uptick. I would say for folks who obviously aren't in BMe Community yet. By the way, you can sign up and join. But for those who are, and by the way, let me footnote. I mentioned our organization is primarily Black folks, but it's for anybody. It's for anybody who believes in these same principles, who believes that we should be able to live, own, vote, and excel in a democracy. Like if you believe in those four things, right? Living, owning, voting, and excelling, which also spells love, LOVE, live, own, vote, excel. But if you believe in those things, then you can join BMe Community. So that little footnote. The other thing that I would offer for folks who are exhausted is, again, part of your exhaustion is you've been taught to tune in to all the pains, but not the progress, right? Not the promise. And so an asset framing practice is to actually look for the good in people and in the news and in your colleagues and in your mom and your cousins. And, like just this habit of balancing. And by the way, it's not an either or argument, right? It's not either asset frame or deficit frame. It's that your brain is narrative driven. So if all you do is give it negative information, then it thinks the world is a negative place, right? You have to balance it out and give it a more accurate perception, and that will re-energize you by itself. And then if none of that stuff works, I invite no seriously, if you're still not clicking, I invite you to type in into some search engine the words BMe Unlimited, BMe Unlimited. These are TED-style talks produced by our members about the world, and I think a video a day will keep the exhaustion away.
That's all really wonderful advice, and I do think many people in the audience are feeling that. So I really appreciate that answer. We have a question from Adam. For the summit, we are coming together as community. I am also interested in meeting some new people, perhaps a mentor. What role have mentors played? I see the value of a guide, especially in these rapidly changing times.
Oh, yeah. No, I've certainly had a lot of mentors. One of the important things to consider, and I encourage, life is about timing, okay? So if you understand that life is about timing, then do your role in your time, right? And so you all are at the most critical time. I cannot overemphasize how important, if you're between the ages like 20 and 35-ish, somewhere in that range, like that is the most critical time in your adult formation. And you happen to be in that age range when it matters most. And here's what I mean. As I mentioned, the boomer generation is sort of aging out of the mainstream. They have defined everything about global politics, global personalities, global priorities. They have held the reins for 5 decades. And they're finally in a position where, as a group, they're going to start releasing these reins, either because they're dying out, straight out, or because they're retiring from the levels of power that they've had before. That's unprecedented. That's never happened before. Never happened before. And the age where they formed their sort of views of, sort of adult mindset, the age where they did that was when they were in their 20s to 30s, the age you're at right now. And you are statistically a larger generation. So I guess what I'm saying to you is we're literally experiencing a global cultural transition. And you're at the age where if you can recognize that, you can hold on to that, then you can be intentional about what culture emerges next, right? Don't sleep on it. Don't assume that because it hasn't happened before, it can't happen now. I mean, if you've been keeping score, all kinds of things that never happened before have been happening now. And you could be one of them, right? You could be, you and your clique and your friends, you could be one of the folks that sets a new pattern. And just don't let anybody talk you out of that.
That's excellent. I hope many of you will be that. Fizza has a question. How is timing different from planning? Yeah. Or do you think that's the same?
No, they're not. I used to fund entrepreneurs. I was a grant maker, so obviously we looked at a lot of plans. Before that, I was at Ashoka, so we looked at a lot of plans. I've also funded, venture, for-profit venture, so we look at a lot of plans. So plans absolutely matter. Planning and timing is not the same thing, because the only thing that I've ever seen about every type of business plan I've ever looked at, the only thing that is absolutely assured is that nobody follows the actual plan once they get out to sea. Like, I mean, you kind of do, but never verbatim, right? You need a good plan, and no plan survives first contact. But the point is, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is, absolutely you need the plan, but what really matters most is the timing, right? execute the right steps at the right time and let go of the wrong steps, at the wrong time, I guess, or when the time is right for that. But the point is, take your time to plan, absolutely, but pay way more attention to the actual wins when you set sail, right? Than whatever the plan said the win should have been.
Absolutely. We have another question. What advice would you give to someone who's interested in social entrepreneurship and creating change in the world? Talk to us about the type of leader needed to do this work.
Sure. I used to run Ashoka in the U.S. I am an Ashoka Fellow. I'm also an Aspen Fellow and other, sort of social entrepreneurial fellowships and engagements. I feel like I am one. I feel like I've funded ones. So you're getting this from someone who has multiple perspectives on the thing. And I happen to be a Black guy, and social entrepreneurship doesn't usually have Black folks at the upper end of those, food chains. But the question was, what would you give? What advice would I give someone?
And then also, what are the qualities of leadership that really matter?
So the crazy thing, the biggest thing about being a social entrepreneur is, to me, is you have to be an entrepreneur first. Entrepreneurs are, this sort of bizarre animal anyway, that can take an idea and deal with ambiguity but also be very specific and tactical. So first of all, you have to be an entrepreneur. And then after that, you have to be the kind of entrepreneur that the business world could not support, right? A business entrepreneur decides they want to make cookies, just for example, and they just make delicious cookies, and you sell, you make one cookie, you sell that, and it's very easy. The math on it is easy. A social entrepreneur has to figure out how to solve much more complex problems. And the beneficiary is very rarely the payer, right? The immediate beneficiary is very rare. So you have to be an entrepreneur, but you actually have to be more innovative with less resources than a typical entrepreneur, even when your business, is working, even as it starts to matriculate. So the summary of all that means that in order to be a really effective social entrepreneur, you have to be irrationally stubborn. And irrationally stubborn. Like you have to keep going when it makes no sense to keep going, right? You have to be irrationally stubborn, and you have to be very, very flexible, willing to adjust at the turn of a hat, right? And you have to listen, like stay proximate to whoever it is that you're serving, because they will always show you like a better path than if you're talking, all these so-called experts who don't actually understand your populations. One of the biggest things, maybe the last thing I'll say about that is, one of the biggest things about that, sort of a peeve of mine, is when you're an innovator, people are going to tell you that what you're thinking of can't work only because they don't understand how it can work. They're being honest, right? They just don't get it, right? They're going to tell you that, and you have to not listen to the fact that it can't work, but listen to all the reasons why they say it can't. Like they're showing you the system they see. And as I said, hacking is understanding that system well enough to get to do something it wasn't designed to do. So these are all the qualities that I think it takes to be a really successful social entrepreneur. But to give you evidence that I think is worthwhile, I am a Black man in America running an organization that is, Black folks from stem to stern, and folks like Amex and Gates and others trust and respect us to learn from and grow with us. But we never had to, sacrifice our legitimate love for Black people. We never pretend like it's all about emulsifying. We just recognize that you can be Black and love people. Like these are not contradictions. Like we're cool. And so I'll stop there. But the real point is, be stubborn, be flexible, listen, but don't accept anything you don't agree with.
That's wonderful advice. We have time for just one more question. And I'm torn because there are a couple of good ones, but let me ask you this. What's your advice for someone who struggles with moral dilemma for prioritizing family and work? And I know your family is hugely important to you. So I know you're expert at that because I've heard about your family from you. So let's close on that note.
Yeah, I'm actually at a retreat because I celebrated my 6th wedding anniversary a couple of days ago and my 54th birthday. So my wife is in the next room here at the hotel. And so I don't know if this is a good example or a bad example, but the fact of the matter is, I think about all of this from where the personal connects to the social. So it all starts with, your spirit. It all starts with your internal clock, right? And when you tune your internal clock, when you take the time to nourish your spirit, right, then the space around you is nourished by that, and then the work is nourished by that. And so when you're trying to figure out how do I prioritize these, if you're not feeding your spirit, right, if you're not taking care of your family, if you're not, let's start with your spirit. If you're not feeding your spirit, then all of it will run aground. You can trust that. It will all run aground at some point. You'll crash at some point. So the time that you spend recharging yourself, refueling yourself, is what makes it possible for you to run the long race instead of running the short one and wearing out before you get to the finish line.
That's usually important. And I've been told that we get to squeeze in that other question. So let me do that for you. Travian, what do you see into the next 12 to 18 months? What headlines do you want to see a year from now?
Well, that's a good one. That's fun. Thank you. What headlines do I want to see in the next 12 to 18 months? Number one, I don't believe that asset framing means being all like Pollyannish about things. There is a very hard global pushback against being uncentered in a number of countries, right? Whether you're in India or Brazil or the United States or Great Britain, some core populations are feeling that this diversification, that this change, that this globalization is threatening their way of life. And they happen to be in charge of a lot of institutions and a lot of resources. So we're seeing real pushback, right? And it's not going away, by the way. Like they're not going to wilt, right? And so that means for those of us who actually believe in valuing all members of the human family, like we actually want to get there, that means that we have to practice loving each other. And I know love is not a business term, but we have to practice defining each other by our aspirations and our contributions. Let's do it that way. That's asset framing, right? We have to practice defining each other by our aspirations and contributions, because in the next 12-ish months, 12-ish, 12 to 18 months, a huge swath of the population is going to decide whether they believe that the change is possible or whether it all just feels like the same old, same old. And if it starts to feel like that again, you can bet on groups that have had hope deciding that they don't want to listen anymore because it wasted their time. Like we literally have to lean in and step up and breathe life to our higher aspirations. Otherwise, we will so many folks are taking these sort of incremental symbolic victories as though they are proof positive that we're on some. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. These little victories are only significant if they start to stack, right? If we stay at it, right? If we're never satisfied with the latest, right? And that if we follow each victory with yet another opportunity to prove love and to prove justice and to prove that we value each other, if we start to stack those, then you can see it flip. And I think these next 18 months are a great time to just go ahead and start stacking victories.
Indeed. And thank you for equipping all of us to do that. We'll all become stubborn hackers and use all of the things that you taught us today. But it's such an important reminder that these next 18 months are really crucial, because I think you're right. This is a moment where we can either win or lose, and it's in all of our powers to make a difference. So thank you for sharing all that wisdom. It was lovely to talk to you. Those of you who would like to read a little bit more from Trabian, after this ends, I'll post on my Twitter feed a couple of links to articles he wrote for us, so you can just see more of what he's talking about. I'm at Stacy Palmer, and I'm just delighted to be able to share those with you. And obviously, he told you how to find more things from the BMe community, which I encourage you to do. So please do that, everyone. American Express, I'd love to thank all of you for bringing us together. It was a real treat. I know my day is going to be much stronger, and I'm going to be way more effective from having this conversation. So I appreciate that. I am excited to tell you that now we have a chance to meet the recipient of the 2021 American Express Alumni Award. So let's turn to that. And thank you, Trabian, for this excellent conversation.
Thank you, Stacy.
Really appreciate that really thoughtful conversation, Travian and Stacy. I want to thank you once more for sharing your experiences, insights with us. I'm just thinking about, as a grant maker, this issue of asset framing and how that can impact how I go about doing my business. So I want to thank you for those important words, Travian, and also, the idea of love being so integral to your organization. And even though it may not be a business word, I think we could all use a little love in our business every day. So thank you so much for your insights and for the conversation. I also want to thank our audience for their thoughtful questions. Transitioning to the award, we're really excited to conclude today's live stream with the presentation of the American Express Leadership Academy Alumni Award. Our award was created to recognize an Academy alum who has continuously demonstrated strong leadership and who has had a significant impact on their organization, their community, and the sector. This year, we received over 100 impressive nominations for the award, making this a very difficult decision for our alumni task force, who chose the winner. We're going to take a look at a video, but just know that the video was produced before the COVID-19 pandemic.
Being nominated for an American Express Global Leadership Award with the alumni is a massive honour. What motivates me is the difference I get to make in people's lives on a daily basis, doing something that I absolutely love. Seeing the smiles of the people that I work with, the stories of the people that I've helped.
For my work, I've been inspired from the kindness that I've received as a person suffering from an autoimmune disease. And what motivates me as a leader is really to share with people the underrated power of kindness and how it is the essence that holds our society together, especially during times of crisis like this COVID-19 pandemic.
My vision for a better world is driven by love, is healing. And to see that come alive in the young people I work with is just an amazing feeling. And I think that while it's really overwhelming to be a leader during a crisis, what's really getting me through is that we can use our power.
Our mission is to close the diversity gap in social impact leadership. Since I created Represented Foundation in 2017, I've been able to put 3 cohorts and 19 fellows of Black and Brown social entrepreneurs to create and launch sustainable nonprofits and social enterprises. And so I'm really excited. Thank you so much for the nomination.
It is now my pleasure to announce the winner of this year's award. In addition to this recognition, Atlas Corps, through a grant from American Express, will provide $25,000 to the winner's organization in their honor. Additionally, the winner will be invited to attend the American Express Leadership Academy 2.0 with the Aspen Institute. And the winner is Jacob Ariri, who participated in the Academy program with Ashoka in 2017 in Kenya. Congratulations. Before I invite Jacob and Anna Musiomi, Jacob's sign language interpreter, to join me on the screen, I'd like to tell you about Jacob and his work at the Deaf Empowerment Society of Kenya, DESC for short. Growing up in rural Kenya presented a challenging environment, especially for children with disabilities. Jacob, who experienced these challenges, was determined to make a change and empower deaf people. However, he needed a strong foundation, and this led him to attend Gaudet University in Washington, D.C. Upon the completion of undergraduate and graduate programs, Jacobs returned to Kenya and founded DESK, an organization that is the first of its kind. DESK seeks to ensure equal opportunities in all walks of life for deaf people residing in Embu County and throughout Kenya. Since its founding in 2013, Jacob has grown an extensive network of empowerment initiatives across Kenya, including a sign language training program, leadership training programs for deaf leaders, and a human rights and justice program which creates public awareness campaigns of key legal issues affecting the rights and interests of deaf citizens. Congratulations, Jacobs. Please join me in welcoming Jacob to say a few words.
I greet you, ladies and gentlemen. Abby?
Yes, Anna, Jacob, how are you?
Ladies and gentlemen,
Congratulations,
I
Jacob.
greet you all. I'm extremely honored to receive this prestigious American Express Award, Alumni Award. I am honored and grateful for the recognition. Truly, ladies and gentlemen, because of this is a reminder that the work I do day in, day out on behalf of the matters. Surely, to be considered for this award, I am so grateful and honored and privileged. So thank you, American Embassy, American Leadership Academy. Thank you so much. As a deaf, I have faced several challenges on my way here. But each of these challenges makes me strong. I am today professional who knows exactly what he wants, someone who sets his eyes on a goal and does not lose the sight unless it is achieved. Winning this award would not have been possible without the inspiration I've received from the deaf community, my colleagues, my family, and my advisors, for whom I have deeply respected, from whom I have derived strength challenge myself and perform at each stage. And at last, but not least, I want to thank you all for helping me coming this far. Abby, Rebecca, and Task Force, without you, we will never be able to do an event like this. Thank you. Thank you. Abby, to you.
Well, thank you so much once again, Jacob, and congratulations. I'm sorry we had a little bit of static there, but I think the message is clear. Jacob, you're a phenomenal leader. We're so proud of you, and we really do congratulate you on this award. And I will hopefully see you in Aspen next year during our Academy 2.0. I say look forward to that, and I just want to say you're an inspiration, and we really do appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you, Trabian and Stacy, to the alumni or Academy partners, and to everyone who joined us via the live stream. This has been a great time. I think we heard some great comments from Trabian and from Stacy. So thanks everyone for joining us. It's wonderful to connect with this global network virtually. We invite everyone to join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Time for a live stream conversation featuring Adi Sangupta, Lina Chandra, and Monica Etz Macau, whose conversation will focus on the topic of listening. More information is available on leaderstories.org. I now invite the alumni attendees who are participating in the full summit to take a quick break and then return at 11:30 Eastern Time for alumni workshops. And we're now going to leave you with a video from Leader Stories that highlights one of the dynamic leaders from our alumni community. The video was produced prior to COVID-19 pandemic. Thanks very much to everyone.
When I got pregnant in school, some people thought maybe my life had stopped. My mom encouraged me that I didn't have to listen to people. It pushed me to working hard. When my graduation came, it was like a breakthrough. And I came up with the Young Men Leaders Connect. This is a youth-led organization in Kenya that seek to nurture young women in leadership and equip them with skills and knowledge and also opportunities to respond to society's issues.
Education is power. Education is power. Education is power. Education is power.
The American Express Leadership Academy was able to provide a platform where I shared with other change makers in Africa, and that was really motivating because you feel you are not alone, and we have other people like you who feel the need for change and they're taking the step. I understand firsthand what girls go through in a society where people believe a man is the security, a man is the voice. I know what education can do for a young woman. So it drives me every day that there's someone looking up to me.